The 11th Book of the Odysseys of Homer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Phil Schempf. The 11th Book of the Odysseys of Homer. Translated by George Chapman. The Argument. Ulysses' way to hell appears, where he the grave Tiresias hears, enquires his own and others' fates. His mother sees, and the after states in which were held by sad decease heroes and heroesses, a number that at Troy waged war; as Ajax, that was still at jar with Ithacus for the arms he lost, and with the great Achilles' ghost. Another argument. Lambda. Ulysses here invokes the dead. The lives appear hereafter led. Arrived now at our ship, we launch'd, and set our mast up, put forth sail, and in did get our late got cattle. Up our sails we went, my wayward fellows mourning now the event. A good companion yet, a foreright wind, Circe, the excellent utterer of her mind, supplied our murmuring consorts with, that was both speed and guide to our adventurous pass. All day our sails stood to the winds, and made our voyage prosperous. Sun then set, and shade all ways obscuring, on the bounds we fell of deep Oceanus, where people dwell whom a perpetual cloud obscures outright; to whom the cheerful sun lends never light, nor when he mounts the star sustaining heaven, nor when he stoops earth, and sets up the even. But night holds fixed wings, feather'd all with banes, above those most unblessed Cimmerians. Here drew we up our ship, our sheep withdrew, and walk'd the shore till we attain'd the view Of that sad region Circe had foreshow'd, and then the sacred off'rings to be vow'd Eurylochus and Persimedes bore; when I my sword drew, and earth's womb did gore, till a pit digg'd of a cubit round, with which the liquid sacrifice we crown'd. First honey mix'd with wine, then sweet wine neat, then water pour'd in, last the flour of wheat. Much I importun'd then the weak neck'd dead, and vow'd, when I the barren soil should tread Of cliffy Ithaca, amidst my hall to kill a heifer, my clear best of all, and give in off'ring, on a pile compos'd Of all the choice goods my whole house enclos'd; And to Tiresias himself, alone, a sheep coal black, and the selectest one of all my flocks. When to the pow'rs beneath, the sacred nation that surviv'd with death, my prayers and vows had done devotions fit, I took the off'rings, and upon the pit Bereft their lives. Out gush'd the sable blood, And round about me fled out of the flood The souls of the deceased. There cluster'd then Youths and their wives, much suff'ring aged men, Soft tender virgins, that but new came there By timeless death, and green their sorrows were. There men at arms, with armours all embrued, Wounded with lances, and with falchions hew'd, In numbers up and down the ditch did stalk, And threw unmeasur'd cries about their walk, So horrid that a bloodless fear surpris'd My daunted spirits. Straight then I advis'd My friends to flay the slaughter'd sacrifice, Put them in fire, and to the Deities, Stern Pluto and Persephone, apply Exciteful prayers. Then drew I from my thigh my well edg'd sword, stepp'd in, and firmly stood Betwixt the prease of shadows and the blood, And would not suffer any one to dip Within our off'ring his unsullied lip, Before Tiresias that did all control. The first that press'd in was Elpenor's soul, His body in the broad way'd earth as yet Unmourn'd, unburied by us, since we Sweat with other urgent labours. Yet his smart I wept to see, and rued it from my heart, Enquiring how he could before me be That came by ship. He, mourning, answer'd me: "In Circe's house the spite some spirit did bear, And the unspeakable good liquor there, Hath been my bane. For, being to descend A ladder much in height, I did not tend My way well down, but forwards made a proof To tread the rounds, and from the very roof Fell on my neck, and brake it, and this made My soul thus visit this infernal shade. And here, by them that next thyself are dear, Thy wife and father, that a little one Gave food to thee, and by thy only son At home behind thee left, Telemachus. Do not depart by stealth, and leave me thus Unmourn'd, unburied, lest neglected I bring on thyself th' incensed Deity. I know that, sail'd from hence, thy ship must touch On the isle Ææa; where vouchsafe thus much, Good king, that landed, thou wilt instantly Bestow on me thy royal memory To this grace, that my body, arms, and all, May rest consum'd in fiery funeral, And on the foamy shore a sepulchre Erect to me, that after times may hear Of one so hapless. Let me these implore, And fix upon my sepulchre the oar With which alive I shook the aged seas, And had of friends the dear societies. I told the wretched soul I would fulfill, And execute to the utmost point his will. And all the time we sadly talk'd, I still My sword above the blood held, when aside The idol of my friend still amplified His plaint, as up and down the shades he aired. Then my deceaséd mother's soul appear'd, Fair daughter of Autolycus the great, Grave Anticlea, whom, when forth I set For sacred Ilion, I had left alive. Her sight much mov'd me, and to tears did drive My note of her decease; and yet not she, Though in my ruth she held the highest degree, Would I admit to touch the sacred blood, Till from Tiresias I had understood What Circe told me. At the length did land Theban Tiresias' soul, and in his hand Sustain'd a golden scepter, knew me well, And said: "O man unhappy! Why to hell Admitt'st thou dark arrival, and the light The sun gives leav'st, to have the horrid sight Of this black region, and the shadows here? Now sheathe thy sharp sword, and the pit forbear, That I the blood may taste, and then relate The truth of those acts that affect thy fate." I sheath'd my sword, and left the pit, till he, The black blood tasting, thus instructed me: "Renown'd Ulysses, all unask'd I know That all the cause of thy arrival now Is to enquire thy wish'd retreat for home; Which hardly God will let thee overcome, Since Neptune still will his apposure try, With all his laid up anger, for the eye His lov'd son lost to thee. Yet through all Thy suff'ring course (which must be capital) If both thine own affections and thy friends' Thou wilt contain, when thy access ascends The three fork'd island, having 'scap'd the seas, Where ye shall find fed on the flow'ry leas Fat flocks, and oxen, which the sun doth own, To whom are all things as well heard as shown, And never dare one head of those to slay, But hold unharmful on your wishéd way. Though through enough affliction, yet secure Your fates shall land ye; but presage says sure, If once ye spoil them, spoil to all thy friends, Spoil to thy fleet; and if the justice ends Short of thyself, it shall be long before, And that length forc'd out with infliction's store, When, losing all thy fellows, in a sail Of foreign built, when most thy fates prevail In thy deliv'rance, thus the event shall sort: Thou shalt find shipwrack raging in thy port, Proud men thy goods consuming, and thy wife, Urging with gifts, give charge upon thy life. But all these wrongs revenge shall end to thee, And force, or cunning, set with slaughter free The house of all thy spoilers. Yet again Thou shalt a voyage make, and come to men That know no sea, nor ships, nor oars that are Wings to a ship, nor mix with any fair Salt's savoury vapour. Where thou first shalt land, This clear giv'n sign shall let thee understand, That there those men remain. Assume ashore Up to thy royal shoulder a ship oar, With which, when thou shalt meet one on the way That will in country admiration say, 'What dost thou with that wand upon thy neck?' There fix that wand thy oar, and that shore deck With sacred rites to Neptune. Slaughter there A ram, a bull, and (who for strength doth bear The name of husband to a herd) a boar. And coming home, upon thy natural shore Give pious hecatombs to all the Gods, Degrees observ'd. And then the periods Of all thy labours in the peace shall end Of easy death; which shall the less extend His passion to thee, that thy foe, the sea, Shall not enforce it, but death's victory Shall chance in only earnest prey vow'd age. Obtain'd at home, quite empty of his rage, Thy subjects round about thee, rich and blest. And here hath truth summ'd up thy vital rest." I answer'd him: "We will suppose All these decreed in Deity. Let it likewise please Tiresias to resolve me, why so near The blood and me my mother's soul doth bear, And yet nor word nor look vouchsafe her son. Doth she not know me?" "No," said he, "nor none Of all these spirits, but myself alone, Knows anything till he shall taste the blood. But whomsoever you shall do that good, He will the truth of all you wish unfold; Who you envy it to will all withhold." Thus said the kingly soul, and made retreat Amidst the inner parts of Pluto's seat, When he had spoke thus by divine instinct. Still I stood firm, till to the blood's precinct My mother came, and drunk; and then she knew I was her son, had passion to renew Her natural plaints, which thus she did pursue: "How is it, O my son, that you alive This deadly darksome region underdive? 'Twixt which and earth so many mighty seas And horrid currents interpose their prease, Oceanus in chief; which none, unless More help'd than you, on foot now can transgress. A well built ship he needs that ventures there. Com'st thou from Troy but now, enforc'd to err All this time with thy soldiers? Nor hast seen Ere this long day the country, and thy queen?" I answer'd: "That a necessary end To this infernal state made me contend, That from the wise Tiresias' Theban soul I might an oracle involv'd unroll. For I came nothing near Achaia yet, Nor on our lov'd earth happy foot had set, But, mishaps suff'ring, err'd from coast to coast, Ever since first the mighty Grecian host Divine Atrides led to Ilion, And I his follower, to set war upon The rapeful Trojans; and so pray'd she would The fate of that ungentle death unfold, That forc'd her thither; if some long disease, Or that the spleen of her that arrows please, Diana, envious of the most eminent dames, Had made her the object of her deadly aims. My father's state and sons I sought, if they Kept still my goods, or they became the prey Of any other, holding me no more In pow'r of safe return; or if my store My wife had kept together with her son; If she her first mind held, or had been won By some chief Grecian from my love and bed." All this she answer'd: "That affliction fed On her blood still at home, and that to grief She all the days and darkness of her life In tears had consecrate; that none possess'd My famous kingdom's throne, but the interest My son had in it still he held in peace, A court kept like a prince, and his increase Spent in his subjects' good, administ'ring laws With justice, and the general applause A king should merit, and all call'd him king. My father kept the upland, labouring, And shunn'd the city, us'd no sumptuous beds, Wonder'd at furnitures, nor wealthy weeds, But in the winter, strew'd about the fire Laid with his slaves in ashes, his attire Like to a beggar's; when the summer came, And autumn all fruits ripen'd with his flame, Where grape charg'd vines made shadows most abound, His couch with fallen leaves made upon the ground; And here lay he, his sorrow's fruitful state Increasing, as he faded for my fate. And now the part of age that irksome is Lay sadly on him, and that life of his She led, and perish'd in; not slaughter'd by The dame that darts lov'd and her archery, Nor by disease invaded, vast and foul, That wastes the body, and sends out the soul With shame and horror; only in her moan For me and my life she consum'd her own. She thus, when I had great desire to prove My arms the circle where her soul did move. Thrice prov'd I, thrice she vanish'd like a sleep Or fleeting shadow, which struck much more deep The wounds my woes made, and made ask her why She would my love to her embraces fly, And not vouchsafe that ev'n in hell we might Pay pious Nature her unalter'd right, And give vexation here her cruel fill. Should not the queen here, to augment the ill Of ev'ry sufferance, which her office is, Enforce thy idol to afford me this?" "O son," she answer'd, "of the race of men The most unhappy, our most equal queen Will mock no solid arms with empty shade, Nor suffer empty shades again t' invade Flesh, bones, and nerves, nor will defraud the fire Of his last dues, that, soon as spirits expire And leave the white bone, are his native right, When, like a dream, the soul assumes her flight. The light then of the living with most haste, O son, contend to. This thy little taste Of this state is enough, and all this life Will make a tale fit to be told thy wife. This speech we had, when now repair'd to me More female spirits, by Persephone Driven on before her. All the heroes' wives, And daughters, that led their second lives, About the black blood throng'd; of whom yet more My mind impell'd me to inquire, before I let them all together taste the gore. For then would all have been dispers'd, and gone Thick as they came. I therefore, one by one, Let taste the pit, my sword drawn from my thigh, And stand betwixt them made, when severally All told their stocks. The first that quench'd her fire Was Tyro, issued of a noble sire. She said she sprung from pure Salmoneus' bed, And Cretheus, son of Æolus, did wed. Yet the divine flood Epnepus lov'd, who much the most fair stream Of all floods mov'd; near whose streams Tyro walking, Neptune came, Like Epnepus, and enjoy'd the dame. Like to a hill the blue and snaky flood Above the immortal and the mortal stood, And hid them both, as both together lay, Just where his current falls into the sea. Her virgin waist dissolv'd, she slumber'd then. But when the God had done the work of men, Her fair hand gently wringing, thus he said: "Woman, rejoice in our combined bed. For when the year hath run his circle round, Because the Gods' loves must in fruit abound, My love shall make, to cheer thy teeming moans, Thy one dear burden bear 2 famous sons. Love well, and bring them up. Go home and see That, though of more joy yet I shall be free, Thou dost not tell to glorify thy birth. Thy love is Neptune, shaker of the earth." This said, he plung'd into the sea, and she Begot with child by him, the light let see Great Peleus and Neleus, that became In Jove's great ministry of mighty fame. Peleus in broad Iolcus held his throne, Wealthy in cattle; the other royal son Rul'd sandy Pylos. To these issue more This queen of women to her husband bore, Æson, and Pheres, and Amithaon, That for his fight on horseback stoop'd to none. Next her I saw admir'd Antiope, Asopus' daughter, who, as much as she Boasted attraction of great Neptune's love, Boasted to slumber in the arms of Jove, And 2 sons likewise at one burden bore, To that her all controlling paramour Amphion, and fair Zethus, that first laid Great Thebes' foundations, and strong walls convey'd About her turrets, that 7 ports enclos'd. For though the Thebans much in strength repos'd, Yet had not they the strength to hold their own, Without the added aids of wood and stone. Alcmena next I saw, that famous wife Was to Amphitrio, and honour'd life Gave to lion hearted Hercules, That was of Jove's embrace the great increase. I saw besides proud Creon's daughter there, Bright Megara, that nuptial yoke did wear With Jove's great son, who never field did try But bore to him the flow'r of victory. The mother then of Œdipus I saw, Fair Epicasta, that, beyond all law, Her own son married, ignorant of kind, And he, as darkly taken in his mind, His mother wedded, and his father slew; Whose blind act heav'n expos'd at length to view. And he in all lov'd Thebes the supreme state With much moan manag'd, for the heavy fate The Gods laid on him. She made violent flight To Pluto's dark house from the loathed light, Beneath a steep beam strangled with a cord, And left her son, in life, pains as abhorr'd As all the Furies pour'd on her in hell. Then saw I Chloris, that did so excell In answering beauties, that each part had all. Great Neleus married her, when gifts not small Had won her favour, term'd by name of dow'r. She was of all Amphion's seed the flow'r. Amphion, call'd Dioscides, that then Rul'd strongly Mynidean Orchomen, And now his daughter rul'd the Pylian throne, Because her beauty's empire overshone. She brought her wife awed husband, Neleus, Nestor much honour'd, Periclymenus, And Chromius, sons with sov'reign virtues grac'd. but after brought a daughter that surpass'd Rare beautied Pero. So for form exact That nature to a miracle was rack'd In her perfections. Blaz'd with the eyes of men that made all the country's hearts a chain, And drew them suitors to her; which her sire Took vantage of; and since he did aspire To nothing more than to the broad brow'd herd Of oxen, which the common fame so rear'd, Own'd by Iphiclus, not a man should be His Pero's husband, that from Phylace Those never yet driven oxen could not drive. Yet these a strong hope held him to achieve, Because a prophet that had never err'd Had said, that only he should be preferr'd To their possession. But the equal fate Of God withstood his stealth, in extricate Imprisoning bands; and sturdy churlish swains That were the herdsmen, who withheld with chains The stealth attempter, which was only he That durst abet the act with prophecy. None else would undertake it, and he must. The king would needs a prophet should be just. But when some days and months expir'd were, And all the hours had brought about the year, The prophet did so satisfy the king, Iphiclus, all his cunning questioning, That he enfranchis'd him; and all worst done, Jove's counsel made the all safe conclusion. Then saw I Leda, link'd in nuptial chain With Tyndarus, to whom she did sustain Sons much renown'd for wisdom, Castor one, That pass'd for use of horse comparison, And Pollux, that excell'd in whirlbat fight. Both these the fruitful earth bore, while the light Of life inspir'd them. After which, they found Such grace with Jove that both liv'd under ground. By change of days, life still did one sustain, While the other died. The dead then liv'd again, the living dying. Both of one self date, their lives and deaths made By the Gods and Fate. Iphimedia after Leda came, That did derive from Neptune too the name Of father to two admirable sons. Life yet made short their admirations, who God oppos'd Otus had to name, And Ephialtes, far in sound of fame. The prodigal earth so fed them, that they grew To most huge stature, and had fairest hue Of all men but Orion under heaven. At 9 years old 9 cubits they were driven Abroad in breadth, and sprung 9 fathoms high. They threaten'd to give battle to the sky And all th' Immortals. They were setting on Ossa upon Olympus, And upon steep Ossa leavy Peleus, That even they might a highway make With lofty heaven; and had perhaps Perform'd it, had they liv'd till they Were striplings. But Jove's son depriv'd their limbs of life, before the age That begins the flow'r of youth, and should adorn Their chins. Phædra and Procris, with wise Minos' flame, Bright Ariadne, to the off'ring came, Whom whilom Theseus made his prize from Crete, That Athens' sacred soil might kiss her feet, But never could obtain her virgin flow'r, Till, in the sea girt Dia, Dian's pow'r Detain'd his homeward haste, where, in her fane By Bacchus witness'd, was the fatal wane Of her prime glory. Mira, Clymene I witness'd there, and loath'd Eriphyle, That honour'd gold more than she lov'd her spouse. But all the hostesses in Pluto's house, That then encounter'd me, exceeds my might To name or number. An Ambrosian night would quite be spent, when now the formal hours Present to our sleep all disposed pow'rs, If at my ship or here. My home made vow I leave for fit grace to the Gods and you." This said, the silence his discourse had made With pleasure held still through the house's shade. When white arm'd Arete this speech began: "Phæacians, how appears to you this man, So goodly person'd, and so match'd with mind? My guest he is, but all you stand combined In the renown he doth us. Do not then With careless haste dismiss him, nor the main Of his dispatch to one so needy maim. The Gods' free bounty gives us all just claim To goods enow." This speech the oldest man Of any other Phæacensian The grave hero Echinëus gave All approbation, saying: "Friends, ye have the motion of the wise queen In such words as have not miss'd the mark, With which accords my clear opinion. But Alcinous in word and work must be Our rule." He thus, and then Alcinous said: "This then must stand, if while I live I rule in the command Of this well skill'd in navigation state. Endure then, guest, though most importunate Be your effects for home. A little stay if your expectance bear, perhaps it may our gifts make more complete. The cares of all your due deduction asks, but principal I am therein the ruler." He replied: "Alcinous, the most duly glorified With rule of all men, if you lay Commandment on me of a whole year's stay, So all the while your preparations rise, As well in gifts as time, ye can devise No better wish for me; for I shall come Much fuller handed and more honour'd home, And dear to my people, in whose loves The richer evermore the better proves." He answer'd: "There is argued in your sight A worth that works not men for benefit, Like prolers or impostors; of which crew The gentle black earth feeds not up a few, Here and there wanderers, blanching tales and lies Of neither praise nor use. You move our eyes With form, our minds with matter, and our ears With elegant oration, such as bears A music in the order'd history It lays before us. Not Demodocus With sweeter strains hath us'd to sing to us All the Greek sorrows, wept out in your own. But say, of all your worthy friends, were none Objected to your eyes that consorts were To Ilion with you, and serv'd destiny there? This night is passing long, unmeasur'd. None of all my household would to bed yet. On, relate these wondrous things. Were I with you, if you would to tell me but your woes, As now, till the divine Aurora show'd her head, I should in no night relish thought of bed." "Most eminent king," said he, "times all must keep. There's time to speak much, time as much to sleep. But would you hear still, I will tell you still, And utter more miserable ill Of friends than yet, that 'scape the dismal wars, And perish'd homewards, and in household jars Wag'd by a wicked woman. The chaste queen No sooner made these lady ghosts unseen, Here and there flitting, but mine eye sight won The soul of Agamemnon, Atreus' son, Sad, and about him all his train of friends, That in Ægisthus' house endur'd their ends With his stern fortune. Having drunk the blood, He knew me instantly, and forth a flood Of springing tears gush'd. Out he thrust his hands, With will t' embrace me; but their old commands Flow'd not about him, nor their weakest part. I wept to see, and moan'd him from my heart, And ask'd: 'O Agamemnon, king of men, What sort of cruel death had render'd slain Thy royal person? Neptune in thy fleet, Heav'n and his hellish billows making meet Rousing the winds? Or have thy men by land Done thee this ill, for using thy command Past their consents, in diminution Of those full shares their worths by lot had won Of sheep or oxen? Or of any town, In covetous strife, to make their rights thine own, In men or women prisoners?' He replied: 'By none of these in any right I died, But by Ægisthus and my murderous wife, Bid to a banquet at his house, my life Hath thus been reft me, to my slaughter led Like an ox pretended to be fed. So miserably fell I, and with me My friends lay massacr'd, as when you see At any rich man's nuptials, shot, or feast, About his kitchen white tooth'd swine lie drest. The slaughters of a world of men thine eyes, Both private, and in prease of enemies, Have personally witness'd. But this one would all thy parts have broken into moan, To see how strew'd about our cups and cates, As tables set with feast. So we with fates All gash'd and slain lay, all the floor embrued With blood and brain. But that which most I rued, Flew from the heavy voice that Priam's seed Cassandra breath'd, whom, she that wit doth feed With baneful crafts, false Clytemnestra slew, Close sitting by me. Up my hands I threw From earth to heav'n, and tumbling on my sword Gave wretched life up; when the most abhorr'd By all her sex's shame, forsook the room, Nor deign'd, though then so near this heavy home, To shut my lips, or close my broken eyes. Nothing so heap'd is with impieties As such a woman that would kill her spouse That married her a maid. When to my house I brought her, hoping of her love in heart, To children, maids, and slaves. But she, in the art Of only mischief hearty, not alone Cast on herself this foul aspersion, But loving dames hereafter to their lords Will bear, for good deeds, her bad thoughts and words.' Alas," said I, "that Jove should hate The lives of Atreus' seed so highly For their wives! For Menelaus' wife A number fell. For dangerous absence thine sent thee to hell." "For this," he answer'd, "be not thou more kind Than wise to thy wife. Never all thy mind Let words express to her. Of all she knows, Curbs for the worst still in thyself repose. But thou by thy wife's wiles shalt lose no blood. Exceeding wise she is, and wise in good. Icarius' daughter, chaste Penelopé, We left a young bride, when for battle we Forsook the nuptial peace, and at her breast Her first child sucking; who by this hour blest Sits in the number of surviving men. And his bliss she hath, that she can contain, And her bliss thou hast, that she is so wise. For, by her wisdom, thy returned eyes Shall see thy son, and he shall greet his sire With fitting welcomes. When in my retire, My wife denies mine eyes my son's dear sight, And as from me will take from him the light, Before she adds one just delight to life, Or her false wit one truth that fits a wife. For her sake, therefore, let my harms advise, That though thy wife be ne'er so chaste and wise, Yet come not home to her in open view, With any ship, or any personal show, But take close, sure disguis'd, nor let her know, For 'tis no world to trust a woman now. But what says Fame? Doth my son yet survive In Orchomen or Pylos, or doth live In Sparta with his uncle? Yet I see Divine Orestes is not here with me." I answer'd, asking: "Why does Atreus' son Enquire of me, who yet arriv'd where none Could give to these news any certain wings? And 'tis absurd to tell uncertain things." Such sad speech pass'd us; and as thus we stood, With kind tears rend'ring unkind fortunes good, Achilles and Patroclus' soul appear'd, And his soul, of whom never ill was heard, The good Antilochus, and the soul of him That all the Greeks pass'd both for force and limb, Excepting th' unmatch'd Eacides, Illustrious Ajax. But the first of these That saw, acknowledg'd, and saluted me, Was Thetis' conqu'ring son; who, heavily His state here taking, said: "Unworthy breath! What act yet mightier imagineth Thy vent'rous spirit? How dost thou descend These under regions, where the dead man's end Is to be look'd on, and his foolish shade?" I answer'd him: "I was induc'd t' invade These under parts, most excellent of Greece, To visit wise Tiresias, for advice Of virtue, to direct my voyage home To rugged Ithaca, since I could Come to note in no place, where Achaia stood, And so liv'd ever, tortur'd with the blood In man's vain veins. Thou therefore, Thetis' son, Hast equall'd all, that ever yet have won The bliss the earth yields, or hereafter shall. In life thy eminence was ador'd Of all, even with the Gods; and now, ev'n dead, I see thy virtues propagate thy empery To a renew'd life of command beneath, So great Achilles triumphs over death." This comfort of him this encounter found: "Urge not my death to me, nor rub that wound. I rather wish to live in earth a swain, Or serve a swain for hire, that scarce can gain Bread to sustain him, than, that life once gone, Of all the dead sway th' imperial throne. But say, and of my son some comfort yield, If he goes on in first fights of the field, Or lurks for safety in th' obscure rear. Or of my father, if thy royal ear Hath been advertis'd, that the Phthian throne He still commands, as greatest Myrmidon; Or that the Phthian and Thessalian rage, Now feet and hands are in the hold of age, Despise his empire; under those bright rays In which heav'n's fervour hurls about the days, Must I no more shine his revenger now, Such as of old the Ilian overthrow Witness'd my anger, the universal host Sending before me to this shady coast In fight for Græcia. Could I now resort, But for some small time, to my father's court, In spirit and pow'r as then, those men Should find my hands inaccessible, And a fire my mind, that durst with all The numbers they are strong unseat his honour, And suborn his wrong." This pitch still flew his spirit, though so low, And this I answer'd thus: "I do not know Of blameless Pelias any least report; But of your son, in all the utmost sort I can inform your care with truth, and thus: From Scyros princely Neoptolemus By fleet I convey'd to the Greeks, where he Was chief, at both parts, when our gravity retired to council, and our youth to fight. In council still so fiery was conceit in his quick apprehension of a cause, that first he ever spake, nor passed the laws of any great stay in his greatest haste. None would contend with him, that counsell'd last, unless illustrious Nestor, he and I would sometimes put a friendly contrary on his opinion. In our fights, the prease of great or common, he would never cease, but far before fight ever. No man there, for force, he forced. He was slaughterer of many a brave man in most dreadful fight. But one and other whom he reft of light in Grecian succour I can neither name nor give in number. The particular fame of one man's slaughter yet I must not pass. Eurypylus Telephides he was, that fell beneath him, and with him the falls of such huge men went, that they show'd like whales, rampir'd about him. Neoptolemus set him so sharply, for the sumptuous favours of mistresses he saw him wear, for past all doubt his beauties had no peer of all that mine eyes noted, next to one, and that was Memnon, Tithon's son like son. Thus far, for fight in public may a taste give of his eminence. How far surpass'd his spirit in private, where he was not seen, nor glory could be said to praise his spleen, this close note I excerpted. When we sat hid in Epëus' horse, no optimate of all the Greeks there had the charge to ope and shut the stratagem but I. My scope to note then each man's spirit in a strait of so much danger. Much the better might be hit by me than others, as provok'd I shifted place still, when in some I smok'd both privy tremblings, and close vent of tears. In him yet not a soft conceit of theirs could all my search see, either his wet eyes plied still with wipings, or the goodly guise his person always put forth, in least part by any tremblings show'd his touch'd at heart. But ever he was urging me to make way to their sally, by his sign to shake his sword hid in his scabbard, or his lance loaded with iron, at me. No good chance his thoughts to Troy intended. In the event, high Troy depopulate, he made ascent his fair ship, with prize and treasure store, safe, and no touch away with him he bore of far off hurl'd lance, or of close fought sword, whose wounds for favours war doth oft afford, which he, though sought, miss'd in war's closest wage. In close fights Mars doth never fight, but rage. This made the soul of swift Achilles tread a march of glory through the herby mead, for joy to hear me so renown his son, and vanish'd, stalking. But with passion stood the other souls struck, and each told his bane. Only the spirit Telamonian kept far off, angry for the victory I won from him at fleet, though arbitry of all a court of war pronounc'd it mine and Pallas' self. Our prize were the arms divine of great Eacides, propos'd to our fames by his bright mother at his funeral games. I wish to heav'n I ought not to have won, since for those arms so high a head so soon the base earth cover'd, Ajax, that of all the host of Greece had person capital, and acts as eminent, excepting his whose arms those were, in whom was naught amiss. I tried the great soul with soft words, and said: "Ajax, great son of Telamon, array'd in all our glories, what! not dead resign thy wrath for those cursed arms? The pow'rs divine in them forg'd all our banes. In thine own one, in thy grave fall, our tow'r was overthrown. We mourn, for ever maim'd, for thee as much As for Achilles, nor thy wrong doth touch In sentence any but Saturnius' doom, in whose hate was the host of Greece become a very horror, who express'd it well in signing thy fate with this timeless hell. Approach then, king of all the Grecian merit, repress thy great mind, and thy flamy spirit, and give the words I give thee worthy ear." All this no word drew from him, but less near the stern soul kept. To other souls he fled, and glid along the river of the dead. Though anger mov'd him, yet he might have spoke, since I to him. But my desires were struck with sight of other souls. And then I saw Minos, that minister'd to death a law, and Jove's bright son was. He was set, and sway'd a golden sceptre, and to him did plead a sort of others, set about his throne in Pluto's wide door'd house, when straight came on mighty Orion, who was hunting there the herds of those beasts he had slaughter'd here in desert hills on earth. A club he bore, entirely steel, whose virtues never wore. Tityus I saw, to whom the glorious earth Open'd her womb, and gave unhappy birth. Upwards and flat upon the pavement lay His ample limbs, that spread in their display 9 acres' compass. On his bosom sat 2 vultures, digging, through his caul of fat, Into his liver with their crooked beaks, And each by turns the concrete entrail breaks, As smiths their steel beat, set on either side. Nor doth he ever labour to divide His liver and their beaks, nor with his hand Offer them off, but suffers by command Of the angry Thunderer, offering to enforce his love Latona, in the close recourse She us'd to Pytho through the dancing land. Smooth Panopeus I saw likewise stand Up to his chin amidst a liquid lake. Tormented Tantalus yet could not slake His burning thirst. Oft as his scornful cup The old man would taste, so oft 'twas swallow'd up, And all the black earth to his feet descried. Divine pow'r plaguing him, the lake still dried. About his head on high trees, clust'ring, hung Pears, apples, granates, olives ever young, Delicious figs, and many fruit trees more Of other burthen; whose alluring store When the old soul striv'd to pluck, the winds from sight In gloomy vapours made them vanish quite. There I saw Sisyphus in infinite moan, With both hands heaving up a massy stone, And on his tiptoes racking all his height To wrest up to a mountain top his freight. When press'd to wrest it there, his nerves quite spent, Down rush'd the deadly quarry, the event Of all his tortures new to raise again, To which straight set his never rested pain. The sweat came gushing out from ev'ry pore, And on his head a standing mist he wore, Reeking from thence, as if a cloud of dust Were rais'd about it. Down with these was thrust The idol of the force of Hercules. But his firm self did no such fate oppress. He feasting lives amongst the immortal states. White ankled Hebe and himself made mates In heav'nly nuptials. Hebe, Jove's dear race, And Juno's whom the golden sandals grace. About him flew the clamours of the dead Like fowls, and still stoop'd cuffing at his head. He with his bow like Night stalk'd up and down. His shaft still nock'd, and hurling round his frown At those vex'd hov'rers, aiming at them still, And still, as shooting out, desir'd to still. A horrid bawdrick wore he thwart his breast, The thong all gold, in which were forms impress'd, Where art and miracle drew equal breaths, In bears, boars, lions, battles, combats, deaths. Who wrought that work did never such before, Nor so divinely will ever do more. Soon as he saw, he knew me, and gave speech: "Son of Laertes, high in wisdom's reach, And yet unhappy wretch! For in this heart, Of all exploits achiev'd by thy desert, Thy worth but works out some sinister fate, As I in earth did. I was generate By Jove himself, and yet past mean oppress'd By one my far inferior, whose proud hest Impos'd abhorréd labours on my hand. Of all which one was, to descend this strand, And hale the dog from thence. He could not think An act that danger could make deeper sink. And yet this depth I drew, and fetch'd as high, As this was low the dog. The Deity Of sleight and wisdom, as of downright pow'r, Both stoop'd, and rais'd, and made me conqueror." This said, he made descent again As low as Pluto's court, when I stood firm For show of more heroës of the times before, And might perhaps have seen my wish of more, As Theseus and Pirithous deriv'd From roots of Deity. But before th' achiev'd rare sight of these, The rank soul'd multitude in infinite flocks Rose, venting sounds so rude, that pale fear took me, Lest the Gorgon's head rush'd in amongst them, thrust up, in my dread, by grim Persephone. I therefore sent my men before to ship, And after went. Where boarded, set, and launch'd, the ocean wave Our oars and fore winds speedy passage gave. End of the 11th Book.